only payment. Let's take a look and see how this is done. All right. So remember, I want you to keep in mind these pieces that make a successful loop. So first of all, we're going to print off the title and some instructions to the user. And then we're going to get those initial values. So for instance, we're going to get the principal here, the rate, and then you take that rate and you divide it by 100 to get a percentage. And then we're going to get in how many times per year interest is paid, and then start printing out this information. Now here you're going to see a for loop. Okay? Now notice this for loop comes in 3 parts. This first part here is called the initialization. Okay? It's where you take a counter, you give it an initial value. Okay? Then you've got this semicolon. Then you have this next part, which is the condition. Okay? It's just like the while loop. As long as this condition is true, run this loop. Then you can see here's the formula to compute compound interest. So it's just simply the amount is equal to the principal times. This is a function math.power. This allows me to take a base and an exponent. So if I was to write this out, I'd say 1.0 plus my rate, and this whole thing gets raised to the number of times per year times the year. Okay, so this formula allows me to compute compound interest. So then, when we reach this point, when we calculate the amount here, then we go ahead and we just simply print this out. And then notice that this particular curly brace right here is ending my for loop. Okay, so it says go back up to here. And that's when this last piece of that for loop kicks in. This is called the change. So inside of this for loop are 3 of the 4 pieces that you need to have to make a successful loop. Okay? It has the initialization built into it. It has the condition built into it. It has the change built into it. Okay? So you can imagine if you've got something that has all these things built into the structure, who might this appeal to? Lazy programmers, that too, right? Remember, programmers are lazy. When you've got all the pieces of a successful loop right there in the construction. Okay? So when we reach the end of this loop, it comes back up here. It does year plus plus. What does year plus plus stand for? Scott? Yeah, it adds 1 to the year. It stands for year is equal to year plus 1. So it does that change, and then it goes ahead and it runs through again. It checks against this condition right here. If this condition is true, it will run through this loop again. Okay? So a for loop is, you can use a while loop and a for loop. They are entirely interchangeable. One is just a little more lazier than the other one. Okay? So this works in the same way that other pieces do. This works in the same way that the while loop does. Just combines everything together. Okay? So for the syntax, remember it goes like this. You have for and then your initialization, semicolon, your condition, semicolon, and then your change. And then a curly brace to indicate the beginning of that loop. You have your code in here, and then you've got a closing curly brace. Any questions over how to use a for loop?
Is it going to be that complicated, like with the math? Will it always be that complicated?
No, this is probably one of the more complicated formulas that we use. Although today we are using an interesting twist on one of our previous examples. So we have written a function that will do something similar to this. This is the harmonic function. And the harmonic function works in an interesting way. It takes 1 over 1, and then it does 1 over 2, adds that to 1 over 3, adds that to 1 over 4. So our denominator increases by 1 each time. Okay. So if we were to go out to 1/8, it would be 1/4, 1/5, 1/6, 1/7, 1/8. Okay. So in this particular program, I'd like you to assume a smart user. So this user will type in a number correctly, and they will type in a positive number correctly. So the only thing you have to do then is write a for loop that will calculate the harmonic function depending upon the number that they enter in. Okay? So you're going to calculate this harmonic function depending upon what the user enters in for n. So for instance here, I've calculated 5, or I've typed in 5. So it's going to be 1 plus 1/2 plus 1/3 plus 1/4 plus 1/5, and then print out the result. Okay?
Just uses that for loop.
Uses the for loop that we had before. So this is going to be very similar to like our running sum program or something like that. Okay? Katie, you have a question?
No, I just want to show you my plan.
Oh, I'll be happy to do that. Other questions? All right, good. Go ahead and get started.